Sports video games could be many things. They can be fun. They could be a sense of escape. They could be a sandbox. A thing that fascinates me the most, however, is that every video game, every sports video game serves as its own special, unique time capsule. Ring ring, who's that? What do you mean Steve-O has a football team and wants to play against me? But hey, this was 2K5. This was of the times. Fun fact, he's sober now. Shout out to Steve-O. Since a lot of sports video games are annual uploads, they are a perfect reflection of what the league was like at the time and what society was like at a time. And even though each video game release is history in and of itself, there are certain times where the video game itself appreciates the history of the sport and the video game. If you're new here, welcome in, and if you know me, welcome back. Thank you for liking, subscribing, following the channel, interacting with the channel. Everything is appreciated. If you have any other video ideas for me, feel free to put them down in the comments below. But let's get right into it. Now, the first example of sports history in video games I'm going to talk about is classic teams. Whether you know about the team or not, you know that if they're in the video game, that they are important to the sport in one way or the other. Now, there's a good chance that the team may have existed before sports video games were popular, but that's the cool thing about it. I think this is a really good way to teach someone about the classic teams, teach someone about what the legends were good at specifically. And you get to see it in practice versus just seeing it through the lens of greatest highlights that keep repeating all the time. Seeing all of these different teams and rosters be immortalized in the game feels like a really cool part of a time machine. You get to put them in the game, see how they do against teams from the present or the past. It's a really fun sandbox. And sometimes the game has more than just specific team rosters. Sometimes they have a collection. For example, the older 2Ks had the draft classes. Hey Darko. And sometimes they wouldn't have rights to all the teams. So for example, instead of having the Showtime Lakers or the 80s Celtics, they would just have 80s West, 80s East, 90s West, 90s East. And of course, as with the classic teams, a lot of these are just wild estimates. For example, I think that Pete Maravich would have had a higher than an 85 three-point rating. But again, that's something that you're just gonna have to leave to speculation, which is kind of cool actually. I do like that it's like in the mystery of things. But usually through the history, you know what each player is good at no matter what time of the decade. And this is not just tied to traditional sports games. Take NBA Ballers, for example. NBA Ballers has a treasure trove of sports history. For one, having sports legends like Julius Erving and Walt Frazier in the game, pretty sick already. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. NBA Ballers had a treasure trove of collectibles and unlockables. From magazine covers from like the 1980s just chilling in the game. I want to stop here for a second. This magazine archive alone is just enough history that I don't think I could find all of these on my own if I even wanted to. NBA Ballers also had a really cool film vault that just had option after option, snips and clippets from the show NBA Inside Stuff, or anything associated with the NBA, you could find it. If you wanted to watch a video about Magic Johnson, it's in the game. It's really cool. Like, you can barely find some of these videos on the internet. And the cool thing about sports history like this is that a lot of this stuff is optional. This doesn't have to be in the game, but it is. And it is for us. And I think that's really cool. I did not expect the Pete Maravich highlights to be in my NBA Ballers video game. It's just a special surprise that I love and I appreciate so much. Now, MVP Baseball had a lot of history in the form of rewards, in the form of unlockables, in the form of getting achievements to unlock certain players. You were able to unlock legendary teams and legendary stadiums along with legendary players. I almost forgot the super cool retro jerseys as well. Now, you might not know about the player that you unlocked, but they do tell you when and where they played along with having their skill levels, so you know how legendary they are. And the cool thing when you unlock the legends is you're able to see just how dominant they are. What do you mean Satchel Paige had a 99 overall fastball, an 88 overall knuckleball, and a 99 overall curveball? This man is absolutely unhittable. And when you unlock those players, you were able to put them in Dynasty. You could do a fantasy draft if you wanted to. There's only so many times where you could pair Jackie Robinson next to Rocco Baldelli. MVP Baseball, among a lot of other baseball games, has unlockable fields. These are classic fields, fields that might no longer exist, or it might be the older version of said fields. For example, you can get to see a retro version of Fenway Park. These classic stadiums were also a good microscope into how the game was played back then, because what do you mean Polo Grounds is 483 feet to center field? Bro, 280 to left field and 258 to right? What? Another cool thing about the classic stadiums is that they would often change the color to a more classical feel. It makes it seem like you're watching this game on a camera from the 1950s. It's that sense of immersion, that attention to detail. That's awesome. Now, sometimes sports video games just have the classic teams in the game. Sometimes they have the classic teams be a part of a video game level. A historic moment that they may have been a part of might be an achievement that you have to complete. Let's talk about Pontiac College Classics. Now, sometimes a classic sports team is immortalized in a video game just off the rip, and sometimes they're immortalized also in a special moment that involved them. Let's talk about Pontiac College Classics. What Pontiac College Classics did is they immortalized certain moments in college football or college basketball history. And you would have to complete those moments or change the course of history to unlock both teams. For example, the college football game where the band heads out on the field when Stanford and Cal play, that's in this game. Now, the cool thing about the College Classics is there's a little bit of an info blurb that tells you what you're getting into, the context, what team you're controlling, and why it's a special moment. And the cool thing is that some of these levels teleport you right to that special moment. You are transported right to the fourth down, right to the fourth quarter. You might have 16 seconds left on the shot clock. And a really cool thing about Pontiac College Classics is that sometimes you would play the full game, sometimes you were teleported right to the specific moment in history that it happened. It's like you had your own time machine. And I'm going to bring up Time Machine a little bit later. Like, for example, here you really have a chance to stop the field goal and prevent all of that from happening in the first place. They might miss. Now, the older NCAA football games had different years of classic football teams. Like, sometimes they were beyond just the college classics themselves. Like, 1946 Army's in the game? Okay, but it's a really cool dichotomy being able to see the 1958 LSU Tigers be compared to the 2003 LSU Tigers. You get to play as those old Miami Hurricane teams. We're talking about the U, and then the U part too. Now, NCAA March Madness 2005 also had this, and sometimes you would play full games, sometimes you wouldn't. And the difficulty for these range from easy to freaking hard. For example, Chaminade versus Virginia. A known toughie. It's a tough one. Especially if you were a young kid like me and didn't know that you could cheese this level, it was a tough one. But the reason why I gravitate towards sports historic moments as video game levels is I think that the creativity it takes to pull these off is phenomenal, and it's just the extra care where it's like, yes, you can play as all the current teams, but we could also teach you about some of the best classic games of all time through a video game level. Like being 9 or 10 years old and learning about Michael Jordan's historic shot through a video game is pretty cool looking back. And in addition to having classic teams of a specific season, there are also certain teams in NCAA March Madness 2005 and NCAA Football 2005 that have the all team, where it's like the best 12 players in that school's history at the time. Now, I may not have known who was who at the time, but it did inspire me to look up older players, be like, oh, who is point guard number 10 for Arizona? I think it's Mike Bibby. Don't quote me on that. I think it is. And even then, just that mystery and the curiosity peaking means that the history involvement has done its job. And historic moments as video game levels wasn't always just resigned to college football games. In fact, NFL 2K5, in celebration of the 25th anniversary of ESPN, made 25 historic video game levels. From the Ice Bowl to the Drive, there are so many historic moments in history. And again, each special moment has their own blurb. Now, NFL 2K or the college games might not have all the rights to all these people, but they did a creative description regardless. Now, the later stages of NCAA football tried putting a new spin on it, creating the Heisman Challenge, where you're able to take select Heisman winners from the past and put them on any college football team that you chose. If you wanted to put Jim Plunkett on Duke or Tim Tebow on Maryland, you could do that. And each Heisman Challenge led off with video or an interview of them paired with highlights. So it was really cool seeing them in action and talking about certain things about college football. Cool little Easter egg. And again, they didn't have to do that for us, but they did, and it's awesome. And when I say any school, I mean any school. Put Marcus Allen on Utah State if you want. The world is your oyster. And to me, the granddaddy of them all is sometimes you take all of that together and make your own time machine. This is NBA 2K My Eras. With my eras, you're able to start in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and just start clean. With this, you're able to pick a team like the 80s Bulls, make your own draft decisions, and by the time you get to the present day, the entire landscape of the NBA is going to look completely different. I love this because the replay value for this game mode is crazy high. You have an endless web of possibilities while also learning about countless players in certain eras, maybe some underrated players that you did not know about. And the cool thing about my eras is that you're able to alter timelines. Maybe Penny Hardaway plays a whole career healthy. Who's to say? Now, this game mode isn't perfect by any means. Sometimes players are missing, but it does provide you with a pretty good Rolodex of just how good players were back then, and with the draft classes and everything. You can really make your own timeline. I can't stress enough how this has been my favorite mode in NBA 2K, and it breaks my heart that they don't pay enough attention to it as I would like. Now, usually what they can't do, modders and roster builders kind of fill in the cracks. So this is my favorite game mode by far, and nothing really comes close. Now, I think the last form of sports history kind of mirrors what the video game landscape is now, and that's my team / ultimate team or whatnot. So with all of this, you're able to, this is basically just like playable sports trading cards, right? So here you have this Allen Iverson card, right? The thing about the sports history stuff is that this is cool, but I like when my sports history doesn't cause me to have to pay extra money for it. Now, I wanted to show you the auction house where you were able to buy and sell these historic cards or these new cards, but they want me to reach gold tier, and I'm not doing that for the sake of this video. I'm sorry. To conclude, history in sports video games is something that I've always cared about. I've written about it in length at my full-time job. I've also been able to make videos about historic video game players on Secret Base. Go check it out. I put a lot of work into these videos. It's a full-time job. I'm able to talk about historic video game characters at my job. This is my whole job. I put a lot of work into these videos, by the way. You should go check those out. I think the coolest thing about each sports video game annual release, again, is the fact that it's its own time capsule. But I also like when video games turn around and recognize more of the history themselves. In conclusion, I love the history aspect of sports video games, whether it's the fact that each video game is its own time capsule or reflection of society as it was. But I really love when those video games also turn around and give us some more sports history from earlier time periods, whether it's players, teams, moments, or whatnot. Thank you guys for watching the end of my video. Feel free to leave a like, feel free to share, feel free to comment. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one, y'all. Bye!